What's up, guys? I'm Mike G, and today I'm going to be walking you through Initial Audio's SourceLab. Okay, so we'll start here with the browser page. It's more intuitive than most plugins you would see when it comes to the browser, and it also gives you more control, which I love. They have two subcategories for the overall types, and it's the factory, which is anything just in SourceLab, but then you can link all your heat up stuff in here as well, which is clutch. The heat up stuff, though, keep in mind, SourceLab works off of its sources. So the 6 basically layers, the equivalent of what you get 3 of in Serum, it works off of those. And if you're pulling in heat up ones, everything in heat up is only going to have one source. So you got to remember that. The SourceLab ones, they'll get anywhere between 1 and 6. So you can mix and match. You can put your heat up stuff in with other SourceLab presets. Let me show you what I'm talking about here. So you got your categories or types as they call it, and then the actual presets, which are called sounds. So you load up, whatever. Let's go to basses and grab that. You got 2 sources that are used, okay? And then from there, you can go in here to switch out the individual sources, add new ones if you go to one that's blank, and again, go through the categories of them. And it'll say right here, this is from the factory. This is from Heat Up. Most of them obviously are from the factory because it's just this thing has so many presets. But that's just super cool to me because it gives you just mad control. This is like the most modular plugin when it comes to preset control and pretty much everything else, as you'll see as we get to it. So what I really love is the way they've done their tagging. It's very clean. It's very just what I need. Tagging can get messy in these type of plugins, and I show you Omnisphere as an example. I've got, just stupid amounts of presets in Omnisphere, and if you look at my categories, if I go to search a sound, it's disgusting. It wasn't policed by the people that made the plugin, and anyone and anybody can add a category. And look at this. This is just insane. Like, I can't find anything in here. Look at all the different types of bells and different spellings of things. And it's just, to me, it's a mess. I'm not knocking Omnisphere as a whole, but that stinks. So this is very clean. It's very, to the point. And it's really just 2 things. You got your actual, types here, and then you got your genres here. Great. I love it. Other little things before we move on here, you've got your macro backgrounds and your whatever you want to call it. It's essentially your artwork for it. They've got some preset ones. They've got some animations, which I think is super cool. And then you can actually make your own. I'm not going to get into that right now, but they don't move until you play sounds, and I'm not really here to, play beats for you, so just take my word for it. They animate as you play music. Your actual macros here, and the macros have some color control as well. But yeah, again, lots of control, very modular, love it. The sources give you, the basics of control, just what you need. Obviously toggling between sounds. The type, you can load up a source and then switch its type too. And then octave pan gain. You can lock them as well. So if you're toggling presets, you're like, man, I really, with this sound, I want to keep this one source, but find some stuff for the rest. Just lock that, keep toggling, and that'll stay. Okay, so just to wrap up the browse page, we've got glide down here, which you can have it on always, or you can have it only on overlap notes. Your polyphonies here. You can view your favorites by clicking here, and you can favorite any preset by clicking the heart icon next to it. You've got a menu option here, which will allow you to load just the sources and none of the, effects, filters, stuff like that, which is awesome. You can also load the sources by dragging and dropping. So if you went to heat up, which are all, again, just one source per sound, and you just drag and drop, now you have to drag it over the source title right there. It took me forever to figure this out. If you drag it anywhere above, it will not register, but right there you can see it highlights. Drag it, it'll load it up. Now, the heat ups are all one source, but if you go in any of these that are multiple sources, dragging and dropping still works, but it will only load the first source from that preset. So this has 2. The first one says wavetable. The second one is instrument. Now, if I drag it here, it'll only load the wavetable. See? You can do a search here, and then you got your master controls here for pitch, gain, and an ADSR over the entire preset you have, which I love that. That is one thing that irks me about Serum, is that their first envelope controls the levels of the sounds, but it's not in, the modulation matrix. You just kind of got to know that. I don't remember that. I'm just careless sometimes, and I'm rushing when I'm sound designing, and I'll throw this on other stuff. And then when I go to change it, my sound will go from whatever this, is, and then I'm like, oh crap, I got to remap this and then change this back. And it's just kind of a pain in my ass. So I think this is a much better approach to just have a dedicated out of the way one rather than a disguised one that's technically not properly labeled in the matrix. They give you some really cool initialize stuff. I've never seen a plugin that gives you multiple versions of initializing. You've got your basic, just reset to default, but then it's got all these other ones for like setting up for FM synth, basic synth, wavetable macros. This is great. Like this should have been done a long time ago by many other companies, but I love that they are, starting the trend here, hopefully. So, this is basic, you're just going to have a clean slate. But if you go to something like, basic FM, well, then it lays it all out for you. And so that really shaves a lot of time off the sound designing process if you kind of know what you want and you don't want to have to, that would take forever to patch all this stuff. So they're really thinking ahead of the game here. The saving of presets and banks is beautifully done in this. If you want to just save a preset, it automatically will include any samples you have. Serum took till version 2 to do that, and even then, you still have to hit a prompt to say that. This just common sense. Why would you want to save a preset but not include your samples? You're just creating more work for people who are going to eventually forget. So this does it for you. I love that. You can do custom bank images, custom preset image. You can tell it to just auto-generate the image based on, whatever's there. You do these are the fields you have to have filled out: the name of the bank, the type, and the preset name. Optional if you want to put author comments, characteristics, genres, the tagging. You can add your new tags, just please don't get sloppy with it. And it's all super clean. I love it. If you want to export an entire bank, if you're trying to sell them, make them, or whatever, you do that over here, and then you can just go to menu, export to single file for sharing. It will include everything for you. Boom, in this clean little thing right here. And then the same goes for importing. I can just drag and drop that right back into SourceLab if I wanted to. So I love it. It's super cleanly laid out as far as all this goes. I got no complaints there. The sequencer in SourceLab is definitely very powerful. I would go as far as to say more so than the one in Serum 2. I'll explain why. First of all, you get 6 of them, and 7 if you count the master. It's very modular, much like everything else in this plugin. And down here, you can control the layout of it. You can say which source you want which sequence to control. So if you only wanted sequence 1 to control, say, just source A, you would turn these other ones off, and it would strictly be that. You can also lay out key mapping for each sequence. So as you can see, the sequence 1 is laid out to cover the entire keyboard, whereas sequence 2 is only this 1 octave range on C1, going up an octave for each sequence from there. So I love that kind of control. You've got, you can pull the sequences from presets in SourceLab, which is awesome. And you can also drag in MIDI files or load from some preset MIDI files that they have. So if you've got a sequence in any of these 6 sequences loaded up, if you go to your master, there's some extra controls here. It loads the sequences 1 through 6 to octave notes on the keyboard. So you can trigger a sequence with just 1 note via the master. That gets a little complicated, but it's very cool extra control. So you can just go nuts. You can have 6 sequences triggering one thing and just get insane patterns that would not have been possible otherwise. There's also some cool stuff here, like you can control whether you want the notes to shift or not with your playing, move up as you play or move down, or just always stay in one area. So if it's like a drum part or whatever, obviously you're not going to be having that shift everywhere. You're going to want it to stay where it's at, and you can have it detect the key. You can have it automatically detect the key, so you don't have to keep clicking this each time. And these are just some general, editing things: select, clear, and clear all. So yeah, that's the sequencer in SourceLab. You can also choose to lock this, and then when you go through presets or whatever, if you have some, really fire sequences dialed up, they ain't going anywhere. You've got your basic quantize functions: zoom in and out, loop on and off, latch, so you can hit things and just it'll continuously play until you hit that same note again. And then you can turn it on and off, and you can also just manually start it yourself and not have to worry about, things being played back just to hear, and, if you're dialing something in or whatever. If this is not on, keep in mind, the sequence will only be triggered when you're hitting notes and as long as you're hitting the notes. When you stop, the sequencer stops. So you can choose to have this on the whole time. Okay, so going to the lab page, this is definitely the meat and potatoes of this plugin. It's broken down into 3 pages: source, filter and routing, and effect and output. We'll start with the source page. You have your 6 sources down here, scroll through them like so. You can choose the type here: wavetable, loop slicer, and instrument. Starting with wavetable, what's really great about this, I myself am, much like the rest of the producer community, where I am definitely addicted to Serum. So you're not losing your access to your wavetables in Serum. If you go down here, you can access the SourceLab wavetables, your Sector wavetables, another great wavetable plugin from Initial, and then your Serum wavetables. As you can see, I have a horrible pack rat problem with insane amount, but I can use these all in here now, so I love that. Over here, you've got your more modulation type controls. They call it modulation. It's very similar to what you would see in Serum in I'll show you over here, the warp controls. They've split them into 2 over here, where they have what they call warp, and then they have modulation. The modulation is just like FM, AM, and RM, and then sync, quantize, and pulse width modulation. It's not as many types as you'd get in Serum, but they definitely nailed the essentials, in my opinion. Things that I do like more about this are they give you a mix knob for when you're warping a sound. You can mix in the dry signal. The window amount is a smoothing effect, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, but I find that essential, and I don't know why it's not in all plugins like this. You can just ditch the sample, but keep all the modulation you have. It's pre is like kind of an input gain, which again, great. A lot of these plugins don't have that. And here you can toggle through your actual sources again. You can switch over to have unison control on any of the 3 types that you have. I love that. The more you turn it up, the more you'll see them appear. And then down here, you have what you can control with them: phase, octave, semitones, fine tuning, pan, gain, and wavetable position. Very cool. Some final things for the wavetable page. You can control the actual waveform here, where you can sift through and, pick which one. Over here, you can control the start and end points of it, how many of them there are, if you really want to bring things down. And you can manually load, same as you could here, the wavetables themselves from here, from any of the, 3 different plugins that you want to pull them from. The rest of these controls, I'm sure you're all familiar with, and I don't need to go over. You can turn on a separate ADSR for this specific source if you need. Let's move on to the other pages. The instrument page, not all that different. It's a lot of the similar controls, which is awesome. I love that I have the warp modulation and what they call the modulation here over the samples as well. This part's different. Loop, reverse. You can find loop points, maintain the speed. This is super cool. So this will, when you stretch a sample out, or you go lower on an octave of a sample, you obviously get that tape slowdown effect. You can choose to have that or not have that. And they use the Synaptic algorithm, so you don't lose quality. It sounds fantastic. It gives you the option to generate multi-sample, meaning if you've got one sample loaded in there, you click it here and then it just chops it up and it uses that algorithm to pitch each one. So you'll get a higher quality sound. You might not want that though. You might want that lo-fi, disgusting, worn down. So you got options here, and they're great options. You've got the same unison controls that you had in the wavetable, but then you've got Granular as well. I'm sure you're all familiar with Granular. I don't have to explain every control in here, but what I will explain is the ARP function on Granular, because I've never seen that before. I've never seen anyone apply ARP options to the granules in a granulator. That's awesome. You can get super cool sounds with this and stuff that I've never heard before. This stuff, all very self-explanatory. You probably know about the warp. You can pick the shapes here of the grains and then basically skew the shapes of them with this. Moving on to the loop slicer. Very similar layout to the instrument page, the main difference being right here where you can control your slice modes. You've got a manual one where you can just double click wherever you want to put your markers and however you want to split up your loop. You can do cut measures if it beat 2 beats, 3 beats, 16 beats, whatever. That's cool, but odds are you're going to end up using one of the auto modes. The auto modes, they give you different, modes that can kind of gauge where it should put the markers based on what you have in there. I've got a drum loop thrown in there, so we'll just do one of the drum ones, and then it throws it down. If it goes too heavy-handed or not heavy enough, here's your threshold where you can say less or more of them. That looks about good to me. And then from there, you're good. It'll chop it up onto different hits. This over here is the same exact thing as down here, and it just says inherited because I started it down here. I do just want to touch on again that with all 3 of your source types, you've always got the mapping control. Very similar to what you'd see in Contact if you've ever, tweaked under the hood on any type of sound in there. You've got your mapping editor, and it's the same kind of concept, just laying out what keys you want, what samples to go on. You can go in as much detail as a basic contact patch would have, where you've got a different sample for each key. I personally wouldn't see that making a lot of sense in SourceLab, and that's honestly why I like the plugin, because I don't always need something as crazy detailed as Contact that's going to eat up my CPU and memory. If I'm going hunting for squirrels, I'm not going to bring a bazooka every time. Sometimes I want something just lighter. I only need this type of sound, and it doesn't have to be so heavy-handed as Contact. Contact, I mean, as much as I love it, man, it takes a long time to load. It bogs down my session. It slows down my creativity. So this is a very good in-between that stays fast and efficient and, essentially has just as much control in a lot of facets. Okay, moving on to the filter and routing page. Nothing super crazy in terms of filters, but I'm pretty okay with that. I don't need, comb filters on every sound I design. And if I want it, I got 9,000 effects plugins I can use to get it. They do keep it pretty bare bones here. What's cool is, they give you 6 different filters as well. Everything is laid out modular, again. So I can see everything that's going on modulation-wise without having to toggle one page. Well, maybe one page if I'm not on this and I have to go to it. But other than that, I don't have to click this LFO to see where it's mapped. I don't have to click this multi-segment envelope generator. You're going to see patch cables going wherever things are happening. And to me, that's awesome. You hover over any modulation destination that has some action going on, you can get rid of it, you can change it, you can bypass it, to control the amounts, invert it. So I think that's great. I don't love in Serum that, if you're modulating stuff, like I can't see where this LFO is going unless I hover over it, I click it, and that's, I don't know. I want to be able to see everything because my brain just can kind of grasp the sound as a whole a lot faster if I've visually got it all in front of me and I don't got to go page hopping. You've got any amount of modulation options you would ever need to use. If you run out of modulation options in this plugin, you probably need to go to modulation therapy. Your macros are here, and this is where you can rename them if you want to. And then you've got LFO, multi-segment envelope generators, ADSR with hold as well, and a shaper, very basic. I'm not going to go over the details of each of these things. I'm sure you all know what an LFO is, and if you don't, well, you're probably watching the wrong video. Again, this is your first kind of look into the whole routing, and it basically just goes here from left to right, but you can have it go any which way you want. You can take just this source, throw it into this filter, have this filter come out of here, go back into 1, out of this into just effects 4, out of effects 4, back into a filter. It doesn't matter. The sky is the limit. As long as you're ending up in the master right here, you can do whatever you want. You got a nice little visual for each filter that you're on, and that's pretty much the gist of this page. Let's move on to the effect and output page. Okay, lastly, we've got the effect and output page. Very similar view to the filter and routing where you can see your modulators here and assign them accordingly as you would want to with effects, because typically that's where a lot of modulation is done. You've got 5 effects racks, and each one has, your basic effects. There's certainly nothing missing that I'm longing for. You can rearrange them just by dragging them. You can lock them if you want to toggle presets but keep it. You can load the effects chains from every preset in SourceLab, which is awesome. And you can, while you can't have multiple effects of the same kind in one rack, you've got 5 effects racks. So if you are an OTT junkie and you want to stack them up, well, then just, throw your multi-compressor here, throw another one here, and just route your sound into 1, out into 2, out into 3, out into 4, out into 5, even though it's called 2. I don't know why that is. And then your masters. So that's great. It's more control than I would need, and if I really need something, esoteric, a comb filter, whatever, well, I've got Serum effects. I've got every plugin under the sun for that. So you've got 2 different views in this page. You've got your modulators view and your mixer view. A mixer is just kind of, see the patch cables and see where everything's going visually. And you've got technically 6 different output buses if you want them. That doesn't mean that those are all coming out of your stereo bus. This is for in your DAW if you want to have things coming out of 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6. Well, now you can do that with this option down here. That pretty much sums up this page, or the gist of it at least. I feel like I've covered definitely the meat and potatoes of this plugin. I could keep talking, but I wanted this to be a digestible length of time. And my apologies, I don't do a lot of these videos, so I'm not very big on playing my music as I'm trying to show you a plugin and be like, look how fire I am as a producer. That's not the type of material I like to watch when I watch tutorials. I want the facts. I want, as little dilly-dallying as possible. So I tried to keep this as concise as I could. Hopefully that vibes well with you. And if not, hey, sorry. So that wraps it up, guys. I hope you got something out of this. I genuinely do like SourceLab a lot. It fills a lot of voids that other plugins haven't really hit, and that's what I look for in plugins that I put into my workflow. So I've used Initial Audio stuff for a long time, and I genuinely do like their plugins a lot. It's not like I'm being paid to make this video. I just genuinely think this is a great tool for producers, and I think everyone's going to get... Seriously, you couldn't have waited till I was done? I was just wrapping up here, man. I think you guys are going to get a lot out of this. So yeah, check it out. Enjoy. Peace.
Like, you can't do this to him, man.